I want to pick up where we left off last night, and I'm still going to try to sit down a little bit if y'all don't mind. It's not that I'm old and I need to. It's just I concentrate better if I don't go moving around all over the place. So I kind of like to just, I don't know, I guess I am getting old, ain't I? I reckon. That's all right. My friend Paul, whenever I say something about our age or what we are, because he's 84 and I'm 70, going on 71, he'll say, well, it beats the alternative. I said, you just don't know the alternative. And, oh, goodness. I'm going to pick up where we left off last night. I want to go back into Daniel 10 for just a minute. I got some stuff there I really want you to see, because this gets a lot deeper than what I went to last night. You know, in Colossians, that's our foundation scripture, was Paul told us to be devoted to prayer, to continue in prayer. And he's saying, you don't just pray and walk away. But when you pray, you got to hang on to that prayer. You got to be devoted to it. Married to it is even a better way of doing it. You got to be devoted to that prayer to see it through until the answer comes to you. And we went over to Daniel chapter 10 because we saw where Daniel had prayed a prayer. And he prayed this prayer because he had a vision. He had a vision of a great war that was going to transpire. In chapter 11 and 12, the last two of Daniel, explain this great war. And we don't have time to get into that. But Daniel was so disturbed by what he saw that he said he mourned for 3 weeks. He said, I ate no choice food, no meat, no wine touched my lips. I used no lotions. And what he was saying is, I didn't go through my normal routine. I separated myself from my normal routine, and I went on, and we call it a Daniel fast. And I don't really know if you can call this a fast, but he separated himself from certain foods, not all foods. But the point of what he was doing was Daniel needed to get an understanding that would only come from God. Now, hear me again. Prayer has got to be more than just you praying over the meal at night, like we do, or in the restaurant or whatever. But when it comes to really praying, you have to understand what you're doing in your prayer time. And I told you last night that in prayer time, you literally, you're stepping into the eternal realm when you pray. You're focusing yourself from where you are now, and at least I hope you do. If when you pray, all you can think about is what's happening in your life or what's the events around you, if you let the events of the day and time we're in dictate, and that's what you got to be cautious of. You can't let the events of what's happening, especially in this hour we're living in, you can't let it dictate to you your thoughts. You can't let it dictate to you what you know and believe God can do. Because if we've ever lived in a generation that doesn't even believe in God, much less in miracles, we're living in it. And I'm going to try to show you something in this tonight that really applies to us and who we are and where we are in this time. Because Daniel, we learn from this chapter, and we learn from these 21 days, and more correctly, at the end of the 21 days, we learned what was going on in the spirit realm. And there was a conflict. Now, I don't know why Daniel chose 21 days. But it coincided with exactly how many days it took for this angel to bring him the revelation from God. Now, if that was coincidence or what, we'll ask him when we get there. But 21 days, Daniel did this separation of himself. And when the angel said, you set your mind to gain understanding and to humble yourself, that's what this 21-day period was him humbling himself. Just humbling himself before God. And hear me, you can only come before God in one attitude, and that's humility. God resisteth the what? Proud. Proud. But He gives grace to the humble. I'm trying to sit down. I don't think it's going to work tonight. He says He resists the proud, but He gives grace. And you know what? You remember my definition of grace? Grace is, all right, you don't remember it, the power and the desire that God gives to do His will. And you need to write that down. Grace is more than just the favor of God on your life. He lets the rain fall on the just as well as the unjust. That's favor. That's favor. But grace belongs to the believer. And grace is when God empowers you to do His will. We don't have time to get into this, but if we did, we'd go over into Corinthians where Paul was talking about the thorn in the flesh and God telling him, my grace is sufficient, and on and on. But let me get back to what I want to show you. Daniel is humbling himself and he's praying. He's trying to understand what he has seen, because what he has seen, he doesn't really know what it's telling him, and he doesn't understand the events. And we won't have time to get in this because we would literally get off the subject of prayer and go into prophecy. But what he sees is what's happening in these last days right now. And what he saw in chapter 11 and 12, as it is interpreted, is the very thing from which Paul, writing in 2 Thessalonians, begins to lay out the timeline of the Antichrist making his scene. Now let me show you something. You come down in this scripture where the angel came to him and began to talk to him. And in verse 11 he said, Daniel, you who are highly esteemed, consider carefully the words I'm about to speak to you and stand up. Now watch. For I have been sent to you. That word out of the original translation also reads, I have been appointed to you. I've been appointed to you. I didn't just come because I wanted to be here, but I'm on an assignment. I wish we could get to the full understanding of how God assigns angels unto us. I told you last night when we got into the prayer time that the writer of Hebrews said that the angels are ministering spirits that God has sent forth to minister to the heirs of salvation. And this ain't, and you got to get this now. He says, I have been appointed to you. I've been sent to you. He says, and when he said this to me, I stood up and trembled. Now watch. He then continued, and this is where we began last night. Do not be afraid, Daniel. Since the first day you set your mind to gain understanding and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I have come in response to them. Now watch verse 13. But the prince of the Persian kingdom resisted me. Now he's talking about a demonic angel. That is the assignment. And listen, when it says he resisted me, that is almost the same word that was used when he said, I was sent to you. And it means appointed to stand against. And he said the prince of the Persian kingdom was appointed to stand against me. The minute Daniel uttered his prayer, somewhere in the hierarchy of angelic order and fallen, and you got to understand, I got to get up. You got to understand something. The angels operate in the hierarchy of order that is assigned to them. They are not harem-scarum in what they do. Remember when they looked at Jesus and they said, "You cast out demons by the prince of demons, Beelzebub." Jesus looked at them and he said, "Any kingdom, your kingdom, my kingdom, earthly kingdom, heavenly kingdom, doesn't matter. Any kingdom divided against itself cannot stand." And then he looks at him and says, "If I, by the finger of God, cast out devils, who do your followers cast them out with?" He's telling them, Satan's kingdom isn't in confusion. The world is in confusion, but not Satan's kingdom. And they operate by hierarchy and by order. Now, if you understand that, you also understand that when one greater remember Jesus telling him about when a demon's cast out, he said, when one greater than he cometh, he cast him out. And he said, all you got to do to deal with demonic angels is have somebody greater. Who do you think's greater? Greater is he that is. But let me show you something. And this kind of gets a little deep right here, and I don't know if I'm getting off the subject of prayer, but I really feel like I'm supposed to show you this. When he says, "But the prince of the Persian kingdom resisted me," he's telling you that there is a demonic power that is over that Persian kingdom and has been given enough authority and power that he could literally resist this angel, be it Gabriel, be whoever it was. He could resist him and keep him from getting to Daniel for 21 days. But he didn't win. All right? How in the world does an angel, a fallen angel, get so much authority and power that they can absolutely resist one of God's angels? I mean, I would have thought one of God's angels could walk up and go, "Get yourself out of the way." And they'd have to cower their tail and go. But no, they stand against. You need to understand something. You got to pray. You've got to pray for there to be a release of God's power to break the power of the enemy that operates over any territory or place that you're living. Now let me show you something. When you go back to verse 1, you read Cyrus the king of Persia. So you're finding out who was ruling this time, and it's Cyrus the king of Persia. This is an ungodly kingdom that knows nothing about God. They worship God. They worship idols and everything else. They sacrifice to these idols. They fill that kingdom with that kind of atmosphere. And that is what's giving the strength to these angels. Now you hear me. If you want to know why our country is getting in the shape that it's in, it's because our morals, our governments, and our standards are feeding these things and strengthening them. When a governor has to pass a law that you can't train a child, a 5-year-old, about homosexuality because somebody's wanting to teach them. Do you understand the demonic power? Now listen to me. He goes on down and he tells He tells Daniel, but the prince of the Persian kingdom resisted me for 21 days. Then Michael, here comes Michael. Michael, one of the chief princes, listen to the titles they're giving them now, princes, came to help me. And when Michael came to help me, he said, because I had been detained with the king of Persia, but he said, now I've got to you because of Michael. Now, if you go over to the very last part of this chapter, and you go down to verse number 20. So Daniel, so he said, do you know why I've come to you? Soon I will return to fight the prince of Persia, and I will go, and the prince of Greece will come. There's other demonic powers. But first I will tell you what is written in the book of truth. No one, watch this, no one supports me except Michael, your prince. Your prince. Now watch me on this. If you take chapter 11 and 12 and you read it, then you go over to 2 Thessalonians and you begin to read. Let's hit over there. Just say, this ain't on the stuff, son. Go over to 2 Thessalonians. Let me show you something. I'm going to show you why we have got to get our churches back to praying. God help me. God forgive me. Just forgive me, Father, because this is the one place I think I probably failed as a pastor more than anything else. Is I didn't not just teach my church, I didn't bring my church into sessions to pray like they need to be praying. Wednesday night was prayer meeting. There ain't never been a prayer meeting since I've been in the Church of God. Ain't been a prayer meeting. I'm going to show you something here, and then I'm going to get back to prayer, I hope. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, concerning the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our being gathered to Him, we ask you, brothers, not to become uneasily settled or alarmed by some prophecy, report, or letter supposed to have come from us, saying that the day of the Lord has already come. Don't let anyone deceive you in any way. Now watch. For that day will not come until the rebellion occurs and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the man doomed to destruction. Watch this. He's telling you what is going to usher in the Antichrist, the man of lawlessness, the man doomed to destruction. He said, until the rebellion occurs. Now you hear me, and I think I taught a little bit of this last year. The rebellion he's talking about, we have preached it for years, Pastor. We've said, that's the apostasy of the church. It ain't got nothing to do with the church. It's not a falling away of the church. Either Jesus was right when He said, upon this rock I build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Either He's right or He's not. Hell can't prevail against this church. You might give up and walk away, but the church doesn't. This falling away is the falling away of humanity itself from God. It is mankind in his rebellion, claiming he does not need God, claiming that he can be God. And the more, now you hear me, the more humanity does this, the more we feed, for lack of a better term, we strengthen the fallen angels that are the princes over the areas we live. And you hear me. And I know there's preachers who get in trying to name princes over area. I don't care about their name. God have mercy. You know what the name of the prince over your area is? And I go, I don't care. I don't want to know his name. Don't need to know his name. Don't get into that kind of far fantasy type stuff. Stick yourself to what the meat of this word says. There are principalities and powers that have been ordered to stand and resist the house of God, the church. They've been ordered to stand and resist any angels that would come on our behalf. And this is why you got to devote yourselves to prayer. You got to get hold of your prayer to God for something, and you got to hang on to it, and you got to pray it until you see the answer of it. You sit back and give up and say, well, God just didn't want to do it. No, you quit before God could get an angel there to intervene on your behalf. By this time, Daniel's an old man, and he knows what it takes for him to pray and for him to get hold of God and for him to get the answer from God that he needs. And he will spend 3 solid weeks holding on, devoted to his prayer until he gets an answer. And this angel absolutely pulls back the curtain and shows us what's going on in the spirit realm. In the spirit realm. I'm just going to throw this out here and then we're moving on, but we think we can change the direction we're going if we get the right people in government. I think you've seen that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. There is only one thing. My God help us. There is only one thing that the church can do. Well, more than one thing. Not only do we need to be praying, we got to have men and women that'll stand up right here and they'll tell the truth. We got pastors in Canada that got arrested and put in jail for standing up and preaching the truth. They're trying to make it now that if we say anything against homosexuality, it's hate speech. And they'll shut us down. That's what they did in Canada. They shut them down for what they call hate speech. Hate speech. You hear me? If the church does not get back to what we used to do, we prayed until we busted heaven open. The saints of old, they prayed until the power of God would literally light a building up. Light a building up. I remember Mamaw talking about the brush arbors she would preach in. And people would come out to the brush arbor saying that it was on fire because they saw something on top burning. But when they got out there, it wasn't a fire that was natural. It was the fire of the Holy Spirit flaming up. But see, no. See, our generation goes, no. Our generation doesn't believe that. You know why? Because let me move on. Because we have forgotten what signs and wonders and miracles really are. Daniel. All right, here we go. Back to Daniel 10. Here we go. I'm over my rant, I hope. He said, Daniel, since the first day you set your mind, I talked to you last night about you got to set your mind. Since the first day you set your mind, your words were heard. Since the first day you set your mind, watch, to gain understanding. I hope you went home last night. I hope you were reading in 2 Corinthians or 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians chapter 2, what I told you to read, verses 6 all the way to the end of the chapter. Paul tells us there is a wisdom, there's an understanding from God that's only going to come when you've gotten into the spirit realm and you've stepped out of this natural realm, but you stepped into the eternal realm. That eternal realm that you're not going to enter it through your physical man. You're going to only enter it when you get the eyes of your heart enlightened. And when you get into that prayer time, and when you start praying, you get your mind off of the world around you. You get your mind on the eternal realm that is right there, and it's right there, and it's right here. It's all around us. I tell you again, heaven is not somewhere on the other side of the universe. It is the realm of eternity that surrounds us every moment of the hour. And if we could get to the place we could do this, we could step from this realm and into that realm and back into this realm. Paul did it, and you read it where he said, I know a man, whether in the spirit or in the body or out of the body, I don't know. But he was called up into the third heavens. He was called up into paradise. And he's talking about himself. And he said, I found myself literally in the realm of eternity. He said, I couldn't tell you if I was in the body or if I was in the spirit, but I can tell you where I was. I can tell you where I was. And he said, I was in eternity. I was in the very, and he said, I saw things I could not, I can't even explain some of the things I saw. And some of the things I can't explain, God won't let me tell you about them. Do you know that that's what literally changed his whole focus? His whole outlook on life because of that one experience when he was praying and he literally stepped into eternity. And stood in the very he called it the third heavens because he didn't know what else to call it. And see, that was a thing back in Old Testament, even New Testament times. All they could talk about was heaven being up. But heaven wasn't up. Heaven was just, and he stepped into it. And when he saw that, and you read it, when he saw it 14 years before he's writing Corinthians. He saw it before he ever started his real ministry. And that is the thing that changed him from that point on to where no matter what was happening in his life, for me to live is Christ and to die is gain. He said, I reckon that the sufferings of this life, it's not worth comparing. He said, it's not worth comparing to what's waiting on us, what's there. And when he finally got to one place, he said, oh, I long to be there, but it's better for me to be here with you. I'd rather be there, but it's better for you that if I stay here with you and continue to preach. But when he finally gets to that place that he knows, this is it. This is it. He's writing to Timothy, and he said, Timothy, I've run my race. I've fought a good fight. I've kept the faith. But henceforth there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness. And it's not just for me, but it's for anybody who loves his appearing. And boy, he was ready. He was ready just to step over in that area. When you get into this time of going before the Lord, you're going there to get understanding. And you're only going to get this understanding when you get into prayer time. Education's good. God bless education. God bless colleges. My oldest grandson, they sent him to leave 4 years ago. I fussed. I just fussed. I never went to leave. Why are you sending him up there? He can learn to preach here at the church. And then when he came home, and his father put him in the pulpit for the first time, and he got up and preached, I just sat there and I went, oh, that's why he went. Because he preached and they taught him something. They taught him something. But he's got to learn. There are things you're not going to find out in college. There are things you're not going to find out in a theological class. There are only some things that are going to be revealed by the Spirit. Only when you get into that spirit realm, only when you've prayed to that point and place that you enter into the presence of God and you know. And all of a sudden you hear God. You hear God. I've had 2 occasions in my life, and I probably told you this when I was pastoring. But I've had 2 occasions in my life. I don't know, I don't think I entered into that realm, but that realm appeared. Sister Terry was preaching one night. our old home church in Cumming, Georgia. She's up on the stage. I can see her now marching back and forth across that stage. She never put a mic in her hand. She said, I don't need a mic. I got the voice God gave me. And she just preached. I remember watching her one night. I'm sitting like about right over there, and I'm watching her preach. And when she started moving from left to right, I watched her as her move, and I saw, you see that blue light right there? I saw a blue haze like that just went behind her. And when she turned and went back, I saw it turn, and I saw that thing go back over there behind her, and when she got it, it went that way. And I just sat there and kept my mouth shut. And all of a sudden, Sister Terry just stopped. Did anybody see the glory of God when it just came in and followed me across the stage? Oh, baby. Nobody else saw that. My God, I said, God, I saw that. I saw that. And then one night when Joan and I were first married, and I don't even think we had Aaron. I'd come in from my job. I worked in the daytime. Joan would have supper fixed, and I'd get a shower, and I'd clean up and put on clean clothes, and I'd eat supper. I'd say, I'm going to the church. And I'd go to the little white church building. Our pastor lived in the parsonage next door, Dewey Miller. I'd go knock on the door, and I said, Brother Miller, can I get in the church? And he'd go unlock the church and let me in. I was so hungry for God. And I'd go in that church, and I'd get in there, and I'd just pray. I'd spend hours in there, and I'd just pray. Sometimes I'd walk the floor. Sometimes I'd just get down and kneel. But I was praying. And I'd say, God, I don't know how to do this. I don't have the education to do this. But you have an anointing that you can lay on me that'll make the difference. And whether I've got an education or don't have an education. And you can give me wisdom, and you can give me insight, and you can open the Word unto me, and you can let me see things that I couldn't see except your Spirit show them to me. And I'd be praying like that. And when I prayed like that one night, the lights were off in the building. And they had those old lights come down on a chain with a white globe and one little light bulb in them. You remember that? Yeah, we didn't have nothing this fancy. And that's all. And I was kneeling down at that altar, and I was praying. And all of a sudden, I sensed it. I sensed it when the presence of God began to move into the building. And I felt like God or somebody just come up behind me. And I could sense him right there behind me. And I thought, what in the world? And I just stopped praying. I turned around and I looked, and I saw, starting in the back of the building, like a white fog started rolling in. And as it came up through there, when it got to where those globes were, they had disappeared in that fog. It was so white and it was so thick. And that thing just moved up into the building until it finally got and went over me. I didn't know what to do. I just stayed right there with my face buried before God, saying, Lord, teach me your ways. Teach me your ways. Teach me your ways. Give me wisdom. Give me understanding. Let me see what I can't see in the natural. Open up the Word and let me have the revelations and the inspirations that can only come from you. That's what he's saying when he said, Daniel, when you prayed to get understanding, when you prayed for it, from the day you started praying for it, God sent me here. And I have come in response. I have come in response to give you that answer. Listen to me, beloved. Listen to me. The church has got to get back to that place to where when we're praying, my God, we need to have prayer meetings. We need to have prayer meetings. We need to stop trying to entertain ourselves. I'm trying not to get metal right here. But we got to get back to where we don't care if there's lights in the building or not. If there's lasers flashing and smoke machines going. We need to get rid of the stage and get back to an altar somewhere. And we need to get back to where we're praying until angels are appointed to come and stand on our behalf and get in here and start working on our behalf. And we wait until we hear from God. And we understand that the angels are fighting on our behalf. And there's other angels that are fighting against them. And it's our prayers. It's our prayers. It's our prayers that push these angels through to the victory. Push them through. Push them through. Push them through. Push them through. I got to stop because I got to pray. I've got to pray. I feel in my heart right now that if we'll just take a moment and start pressing our way through, you're going to get some answers you've been needing. We're going to see some healings that we need to see take place. We're going to see some moves. You're going to see God begin to work in your homes. And things that you've been praying about are going to begin to work out and begin to come to pass. You're going to see how God is going to take and move some things out of the way and bring some things in to get the word and get the deliverance through to your home or your family or whatever it is you need. But we've got to take a moment and we've got to just spend some time praying.